Welcome to the Cowboy Office Show, where you'll experience expert analysis and epic discussion on key pillars of the equine industry, including sports, business, hobby, and the horse lifestyle. Your co-hosts are Jody Brainerd and Brian Dykert, industry veterans with over 120 years combined living the cowboy lifestyle. The Cowboy Office Show will help you get involved, ask more questions, and create change. We'll keep riding for you as together we learn from the ride already ridden, learn to listen better to our horse, and make our industry better for all. Each weekly episode will take a ride around the industry in less time than you can load the truck and trailer. Drop your email at cowboyoffice.com to receive weekly updates and never miss an episode. Saddle up as we ride into today's show.
Hello, Horse World. We have a special guest with us today, the man that had a cool beard long before beards were fashionable. That's a fact. A longtime friend, highly involved professional in our industry. An interesting point, the administrator and owner of one of the largest Facebook groups on social media, Reining History 101, and history is a little bit of his forte. We're going to talk IHSA, Reining History, and a little vision for the future. Welcome to the Cowboy Office. I'm Brian.
And I'm Jody. Welcome. We want to welcome and introduce our special guest today. This guy's been training horses for 29 years. He's got 2 NRHA World Championships of his own. He's coached multiple World Champion recipients. And considering his heritage, I want to say pedigree there, but his heritage career path is somewhat predictable. His father, Mike Corrington, is an NRHA judge. Also an interesting little tidbit, he trained an AQHA World Champion reining horse named Dogpatch Doc for my father, Jack. And his stepfather is NRHA Hall of Famer Bob Anthony. We'd like to welcome Bart Corrington, owner-operator of BC Reining Horses, Tallahassee, Florida. Welcome.
Well, thank you, guys. Thank you. It's good to be here. It's interesting times we can do stuff like this. It's good.
Isn't it though? That's really funny. I was gonna give you a little grief here right off the get-go. I was gonna say when I looked down at that owner of BC Reining Horses, I was going to say, Bart, you stepped way outside the box naming that business, buddy. Right. Joking here a little bit. BC Reiners, yeah.
You know my heritage. We have to stay within the lines, you know.
Exactly, I get it.
Well, tell us a little bit. I mean, we know well. We've kind of all grown up together in a little bit of different formats. But anyways, you have an interesting heritage, no doubt about it. Talk to us and fill us in a little bit about your business. You're in Tallahassee, Florida, and you run a horse training operation, but you and your mother are also very involved in the IHSA. So tell us a little bit about your business and your operation and what's going on.
Right. I've been in Tallahassee for 30 years, I guess. I started working for Bob when I was, still a teenager and went through all that. But we've had this place, I think, 8 years. We kind of do a lot of different things. My mom coaches the IHSA team for Florida State. We have a reasonably strong little group of non-pros and youth kids that we take to NRHA ratings. We have a decent size, just regular old lesson program for local people, and we board some horses. I mean, we got a lot of different things going on, so it's stays busy a lot.
And the status, good that you're busy. That's always a great thing and blessing in itself. But relative to the modern horse world, that means what to you?
I think we're reasonably successful in the world that we're in. I think in today's world, you kind of have to do a lot of different things. I think focusing on one thing or another is pretty hard. We have a lot of irons in the fire, and we try to manage them all and keep everybody going. It's interesting. We have close to 30 horses on the farm pretty much all the time. And since COVID, we've gotten a lot more. And the horses that we have, a lot of them are actually owned by people in town, which is interesting to me. we probably only have 3 or 4 customers that could take their horses home if they wanted to. I mean, most everybody lives in town and keeps their horses here. And 15 years ago, I would have said, that's crazy. Non-agriculture people, people who haven't been in the horse world or some kind of ag world, have some kind of farm situation, typically didn't have horses. And so I think that's the biggest change that I see in the last few years for what we do in our area. Where we are, there's not a whole lot of professional horse activity. There's a lot of backyard people, a lot of English farms. You get down around Ocala and other parts of Florida, there's a lot more of that stuff. But I've always liked living here. It's pretty cool, and to have that access to people that are outside of the industry, I think it makes me feel good about what we do, that we're getting other people involved in it, bringing people to it all the time.
Right.
And I think that's a smart way to do business. I think that when you sometimes it's kind of like the farmer that he's got wheat and cattle, and if one's not good, something else is good. So I think sometimes
Right.
if you've got some non-pro horses, you got an open horse or two. I had a pretty small barn, 16 stalls for me, because I liked one other person working for me, and that way
Right.
the overhead didn't kill me. And I think that
Right.
I think lower numbers it's a smart way to run a business. I'm also, Brian and I had some discussion about this in the past too. I mean, well, we did actually when we were kind of prepping for this show with you the other day, when you told us that that many people were interested in reining horses, and we're in the city. I could expect that out of a boarding stable, but I wouldn't think anything about that as far as people that have taken over and started to show horses and want to
Right.
compete. That's wonderful.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And one of the things that's interesting too, I'm sure we'll get into the college deal, but we have, some of those IHSA girls who have gone to school and been on the team and all that. And I just had one here earlier today that she was on the IHSA team here in college 6 or 7 years ago. She graduated college and went and got a job and became, reasonably successful, and showed up here, a few months ago and wanted to buy a horse and wants to get into showing and wants to kind of come back to it. So, I think creating a situation where you have long-term customers is a whole lot more stable base than having people coming and going all the time.
I agree with you. I think that's. I hate to say that I've been old enough to have now coached kids of the mothers that I actually coach.
Right, right.
Exactly. So, it's like not possible. But when we're talking about, the IHSA, tell us a little bit of the difference, because I even doing some work for Oklahoma State University, I wasn't fully versed on the difference between the NCEA, the College Equine Association program, and the IHSA. So can you fill us in a little bit?
I know a little bit more about the IHSA. The IHSA, I think the basic differences are the IHSA shows, it's more like a horse show. In other words, they have different classes. They have like a walk track class, and they have some more rail classes, and all different levels of riders on the Western teams. I believe that NCEA, they basically just have horsemanship and reining, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, as the Western events, yes.
Yeah, they, like I said, these girls can start in a walk trot class. We have kids that are on the team pretty much every year that have never even ridden a horse before. My mom keeps, I want to say, about 20 girls on that team every year. A few graduate and a few more roll in, but I would say for the last 5 or 6 years, there's been 15, 20 kids on the team pretty much every year. So like I said, the basic difference, I think, is just what they're doing when they're showing.
Okay.
But there's a couple things you bring up. One, the change in the industry that you see with, I'm going to call them Urbanites. They're more urban people that are wanting to get involved in horses. You see that on a business level, and they're buying and keeping horses at your place as opposed to having to, buy more property and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's very interesting and very cool. And then number two, because Florida State, IHSA, your program, is a 4-year program. So you're seeing 20 plus people. You're getting access to them and you're working with them for 3 to 4 years, correct?
Right.
And the bulk of them are not coming from the horse world. That's
Right.
very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I don't know the exact percentage, but at least half of the girls, the new girls coming in every year, but just want to ride a horse, just want to see what it's about. And I mean, there's a few that show up for the first couple of lessons or the first couple of meetings or whatever, and they might decide it really wasn't for them. But for the most part, they kind of hang with it. And like I said, with the IHSA stuff, they can show in the walk trot, they can show at a very green level, and then work their way up through those classes. And the reining in the IHSA is the highest level. So that I think they have 3 or 4 different levels of rail classes before they can do the reining. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool to watch them kind of go through the whole scale.
And you had said earlier, it's dominated by females. IHSA, unlike NCEA, because it's an NCAA activity, which is Title IX driven, so it's all females on the NCAA level. At the club level, which is IHSA,
right?
But it's dominated by females, correct?
Yeah, definitely here, and when we go to the like the regional shows and the bigger shows where more of the schools kind of meet, I mean, there may be 1 or 2 guys on a few of those teams, but it's not very common, not that I've seen. And I can't explain why that is. I would think there would be a lot more of them.
Heck yeah.
Right.
I get that. So do the girls just, if someone watched this show and said, well, I want to get involved in that, do the girls come to you? I mean, do you go recruit, or do you just, I mean, do they just call you up and say, hey, we want to?
At that level, the girls who are, the current girls who are on the teams, they have, they have different campus meetings and, I don't know, bulletin boards or whatever they have on school, and they get people to come to the meetings, and then they can come out and take a lesson and try it out. I think my mom has, if you want to be a competitive rider, you have to take, a certain number of lessons within a certain amount of time. But like this year, I think she has 3 or 4 girls that just want to ride that are on a non-competitive level. In other words, they're not even ready to go in a walk trot class yet. They're just trying to get in it enough to do that. So we don't recruit. I think maybe the girls just socially kind of recruit and stuff at school, but it's a club sport, so it's not supported really very much at all by the school. Right. The girls pay for the lessons. We supply the horses. Ursula and I have kind of helped out the girls, with the uniforms and the kind of when they go to the horse shows, so they all kind of match and look, don't look like a bunch of ragtag kids. Everybody's got the black shirts and the same hats and the same chaps and all the things. But the school really doesn't support them very much at all at that IHSA level.
Right. Not at an athletic organizational level, because it's a club activity. So they have to do their own. They have to do their own budgeting. It's
Yeah.
So
like my mother, she works for the girls. She doesn't have any affiliation really with the school at all.
Okay.
She's not a school, she just works for the kids.
Right. That's cool.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. The college thing, since I've been involved in it, it's so highly competitive that, Laura, my niece, she's recruiting all the time, as is Terry Sanchez, the head coach, and I mean, it's so competitive, it's crazy, with the schools that are after the talented riders. So, and I don't want to get too far off the course here, because we want to talk to you about a lot of different things, but, relative to showing a little bit, and I, since Brian and I, the officiating is near and dear to our hearts, I'd like to talk just a little bit about the two differences a little bit. First of all, let me ask you about about the horses, because I think it's probably the same. It's, all our horses are donated to us at Oklahoma State University as the major colleges. Is that the same with you guys pretty much? I mean, or...
Well, I think in your guys' case, the horses are donated to the school. So whoever donates those horses can write that off as a tax write-off. We have some horses that were donated basically to us. It's not the school's responsibility. So, we have some horses, and I think the main issue when the IHSA has a show, they need quite a number of horses, 8, 10, 15, 20 horses. And those are all donated and brought in from whoever and wherever they can drum them up. The horse situation in those deals, I think, is like the NCEA. They're kind of donated horses, so sometimes you get some really good ones, and sometimes you don't. It's
sure.
The luck of the draw, literally.
Right. Yeah, from a competition standpoint, are the competitions based kind of like the colleges? Like I said, it's something that's new and different to me, because two girls compete on the same animal, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Is it the same way with?
No, these girls, like I said, it's more of a class situation. More like what we're used to in a typical horse show. They draw the horses, out of a hat.
Right.
I think your girls get maybe 5 minutes to warm them up. These girls have to get on and show. There's no warm up.
Okay.
They can watch the horses being warmed up by someone else, and when the class starts, they get on the horse. They go show that horse.
Okay.
I guess much like in your situation, sometimes the person who draws the best horse might not be the winner. If one of the girls can show, the dink a little better than the girl could show the really good one, shows off their horsemanship skills a little better, I think.
I think that's interesting, because it's like I said. So the donated horses, because I've been asked, obviously, at the NRHA majors here, there must be that IHSA competition going on. But somebody called me and said, "Hey, do you have a reiner that we can use?" Right. So it's just for that competition. Exactly. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Cool.
Right.
All right. Interesting. Okay, and just one more thing. Like I said, can we get back to the officiating again? And with the college level officiating, like say we have at the Big 12 championships and the nationals, which is right in your kind of backyard. Those are they're required to have carded NRHA judges. Okay, so they have a reining horse judge there, which is obviously good. But on the regular meets, that's not a requirement, and I often like that to a quarter horse show with a single judge, where it's very difficult to be an expert in 25 different classes. So
exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes it's a really difficult situation where a girl actually gets a horse shown, and maybe someone comes in and runs one off their feet, and they're still looking at speed, and it's not, the control part doesn't come into play. So do you find that that's somewhat of an issue with your competition levels too? I mean, at the IHSA level?
I believe so. The judging, I think it's like a lot of other things. Sometimes the judges are really good and sometimes they're not. And I think in this situation, again, you are relying on maybe a local judge to wherever the show is so they can save a little money. You're relying on somebody that's maybe going to donate their time or, something like that. So, maybe you don't always get the cream of the crop as far as judges goes. I don't know. I think it's a slippery slope either way you want to look at it. I think that the NCEA level, I think there's more money and more prestige and more things involved in it. So I think they demand a little more, a little more out of the judging and what they're looking at. So that's my opinion. I've never been involved with the NCEA, but sometimes at these shows I shake my head at the end of the day and think, man, I don't know. I don't know where that came from. So
talk about venues. Where's the bulk of the competitions that IHSA are happening? Are they at schools that have farms, or are they at public venues, or where are they held at? And who's putting
Well,
them
we've
on?
had them here. We've had them here at our farm when the FSU has hosted shows. I believe the University of Florida has their own facility. I think that they are maybe the only ones that we compete against that actually have their own facility. So the rest of the shows are at each school's, represented facility, which here would be our place.
Right.
I think they compete against 5 or 6 other schools. So how many schools there are, each school hosts one show a year.
Okay.
So it's at whatever facility the school has.
Right. And does it happen? Is it all in one day, or is it over multiple days? And
I believe now they're having them over the weekend. They have a Saturday. Maybe they have like 2 shows on Saturday and a show on Sunday. I think it depends on the school and depends on how many entries they have, I believe.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So are they, I mean, they, like I said, the ones that we have, like say here at the NRHA major events, or the one that I can't remember if it's the Derby or the Futurity that they would have it at. You would be able to tell me that probably, but is that like, is that your national finals, that competition or something like that, as far as the reining goes, or is it just, I mean, how big an area?
I think they have, they have their regional finals, and then they have the nationals. I think the regionals and the nationals, they move around. Well, the regionals they have obviously in their own regions, but the nationals, one year they had them down here. One year they had them in upstate New York. I think one year they had them in California. I think they kind of moved that stuff around. I think the biggest thing with those situations is who wants to be responsible for hosting the show, because whoever's responsible for hosting the show
got to do the work.
Has to try to gather all the horses.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, like I said, it's more of a horse show situation. It's not head to head. So,
right.
You've got to have enough horses for 10 or 12 girls to show in several different classes. And I mean, that's a lot. It's a lot to ask people year after year to, here, let me use your horse again.
Right.
Yeah.
So since you've been involved at this level, do you see college equine activity growing or about the same? Is there more activity at that level?
It has definitely grown here for our local team. I think it ebbs and flows. I believe that there's maybe a little more participation, but I don't think there's been a huge explosion in the level of participation at that at that level. But like I said, I think we're working more off of a very beginner basis, right. and I think a lot of if the kids truly grew up in the horse world,
right. they go a different way,
and they're really horse showing and they really want to go on, then they're going to lean more towards your NCEA teams where they can get a scholarship and have some benefits that way from it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. It's a huge savings for a girl that gets a full ride scholarship at university. Right. I think that there's I hate to use the word stable, but I mean for the NCEA, but there's always a limited number of schools that have the program, and there's a limited number of scholarships that they can offer. So it just kind of stays. If OSU has 50 that they can offer, they have 50 girls in it, and I don't 70.
And you may be able to answer this question. There's a question for you, Jody. That I know that's a Title IX requirement for those schools to have those classes or have those teams for the girls, and it offsets the budget for the the football teams and all the other money they spend. But I know in the last 5 or 10 years, there's been a couple of different times that Title IX thing has come into question. I think those schools are always looking to spend their money on the football teams and on the guy stuff and pull the plug on some of the other things. So, I think it was just a few years ago, they had to write a bunch of letters and kind of had to make a big stink to get it to continue. But I don't know if that's always in the background, or is that something that they've kind of stabilized for now.
I think it's pretty stable for right now, as long as the same number of scholarships are required from the boys to the girls standpoint. You know what I mean? Football and I mean they take so many, and so they I mean the girls programs are pretty safe because they've got softball and they've got girls basketball, and I mean they can't compete with the boys football team. So I think that's pretty stable. It's more of I think so. Anyway, it's like I said, I'm relatively new to it. I'm having a blast doing it, but it's something that I'm not I'm not super familiar with, but I do know that I do know how the scholarship program.
They feel good about it. Laura feels good about her future.
She feels good about it. I was laughing because I had a good conversation with her. We talk a lot, obviously, since she lives a mile away from me and she is my niece. But that from the officiating standpoint, I'll tell you guys just a quick story about it. She's actually head of the officiating program for that NCEA. And she said, I just have, there's just so many of the college coaches they don't see things the same, obviously. It's, I mean, it's kind of obviously if you're a coach, you're paid to win, right? I mean, or you want to try to win and be competitive and keep your program. But so I said, and she said, anyone that says something, nobody else will agree with it. And I said, go outside the box, because she was looking for the English flat, to have some consistency in the way that it's judged. And I said, well, go outside the box. I said, go find an expert at that.
Right.
USEF is the program that they follow, their rules. I said, so go find somebody that knows about the English flat at that level. And I said, bring that person to your coaches meeting. I said, then you're pulling in an outside expert. You're not forcing someone to try to listen to you. And so she said, she just got back from the coaches meeting in Fort Worth. And I said, well, how'd that work for you? And she said, I have my expert, who is, and she said, in about 3 seconds after she told, what she was interested in, and she said, this is how it should be, because nothing that you're doing currently is in the industry, and so here's a better way to do it, so we can teach and coach and market. And she said, 3 seconds after she hung up, the room was total chaos, and she said it was 45 minutes worth of arguments between everybody. She just said, okay, well, let's move on then. So anyway, it's like, yeah, I thought that was just a funny story.
Nothing changes.
And nothing changes, right?
So, right.
I think the best thing one of these IHSA judges told me when we got done with the day, these girls are all asking questions about why they place and why they do this and why they ended up where they ended up. And the judge says, basically the way I judge these shows is I'm going to watch all you girls ride, and the one who wins the class is the girl that I would want to come back and ride horses for me. Whether you're on the best horse or the worst horse in the pen, I'm going to watch you ride these horses, and I want the kid that I would want to give a job to.
Right.
And that makes sense to me. I don't, that might not be the great official way to do it, but it made sense to me. So that's kind of what I try to tell these girls when I have to chime in, beside or behind or over. My mom sometimes is, you girls got to ride like you're trying to get a job with this guy. Like, do what you think he's going to like, or that she's going to like, within the realm of what you're doing.
Right.
But when you're riding such a varying degree of horses, I wouldn't want to be the judge. Jeez, you talk about trying to figure things out.
But if
imagine 5 green reiners and some non-pros and some open riders all in the same class. I mean,
right. No, I hear you, but simplifying the criteria and getting it down, because there's a good one. Because now it's not about trying to pick the best horse; it's about trying to pick the better horse potential person. The horse, it's straight jockey. And I think that's a difference with the NCEA. I don't know how they do that, because they're both riding the same horses. It's a head-to-head competition. So I guess in a way you're still going with just exactly what the rider's doing. It doesn't really matter to a certain degree what the horse is doing. I don't know. That seems like that would be difficult. Right. Jody and I have casually talked about that, and so we're going to spend some time kind of looking into that at the NCEA level. Because their pursuit, let me ask you this question, is IHSA's pursuit to win kind of at the top of the list, or is this really about developing skills with people that are interested in horses?
Hopefully both. I don't know what their official I don't know what their official idea is. I know what our idea is. I mean, our idea is kind of both, but as far as every school in the IHSA as a whole, I don't know. But I would think that it would be more of the horsemanship part of it, because there's so much more involved. It's not strictly a head-to-head competition. There, you have to. There's the team aspect, and everybody's on the team, and everybody's showing in their own classes at their own levels, and you work up through the levels and all those things. So I would think that building horsemen would be a goal
one
through the whole thing.
Right. Well, that's what I've found interesting on the college level of equine activity, that it seems, I don't know this by numbers. We looked it up the other day, the IHSA, and I understand the difference between the club sports versus the athletic director of sports at college levels. But when you look at sports and sport activities and you go to the professional level, and we talk about that a lot in the reining world, the college level would be a logical space that more people could get introduced to horses, one, reining, two,
right,
as more of a normal process without all the other costs that everybody in the industry wants to bark about all the time.
Right, exactly.
So I would see that as very positive, and it appears that over time that's actually growing, that there are more colleges and schools with, whether they're club activities or NCAA activity, it appears that there are more. And I know more people that have positions and are making careers out of it. It's just like his niece, but Mackenzie Lance, she's married now. That next generation, those are other career options, even what you're doing.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. And any level, anything you can do to, like you're saying, to bring more people to what we do, I think it's good.
Well, it has to be.
Yeah. I think obviously it depends on who's actually doing it. Hopefully I'd like to think that we're all bringing them to us. There may be a few somewhere that are pushing them away, but hopefully not too many.
Right. No, I agree. For any industry to stay alive, you have to. In the sports world, I think that that's an interesting one, because the entire modern civilization culture is changing in all those forms, and all the sports are having that same. I don't care if it's golf or basketball or tennis, and I mean, just look, pickleball didn't even exist 10 years ago. It's now on television. Snowboarding didn't exist 20 years ago. It's now an Olympic sport. You can go down that whole list of stuff. And how do you get the next generation involved is a big one. And I think in our world, in our country, that's one that we haven't paid much attention to, and I think that it's past time to. And that's why I enjoy these conversations at the college level.
Right.
Because even when I went to college, the equestrian, I went to a couple ag schools, but they were organized very different. So those things are newer in today's time, which I think is very positive.
Yeah. I think like we talked about the other night, there's any number of different situations and things that are bringing people to the industry, and I think I would welcome all of them. I think the more the better. That's good.
Yes, without a doubt. And we're going to get to those. Well, we're going to move on to reining a little bit. Since more than half the current membership has not been around that long, and when we talk about people, even talking about not only your dad, I used to work a lot with your dad, Bart, Mike, and he was one of the best judges we had in those days and times. He was phenomenal, and a horse trainer and a horseman. And I've made reference to Rugged Lark. He was highly instrumental in some of those great horses. half the membership of the current reining membership has not been around that long. So when we make those references, we were talking about Dale Wilkinson, even Bob Anthony, Hall of Famer, yes.
Right.
But we're close to that spot where, and I don't know if it's good or bad, I think it's natural, other than which is the spot of growth and forward movement when the current active group doesn't know that much about history. So my question comes around because reining was founded on three very simple principles: good ground, good judges, good purses. And now in our lifetime, we all kind of represent the second year into the third generation of reiners coming through this thing. They're now working hard on the purse levels, which I think is phenomenally healthy, and we'll talk about economics as well. But my big question coming from you is, how important is it, and especially because you manage Reining History 101, which is a huge Facebook group. It's one of the largest ones out there, I think. You got over 15,000 people involved in that, right?
I don't know what the number is now.
It's up there.
It's crazy. It's crazy how many people are in that group and kind of partake in it and enjoy it. It really started as very much a social experiment on my part. We know a lot of the same older people, and everybody's always talking about Willowbrook and all the old shows and all these things. And I don't know, it's 6 or 7 years ago, I kind of discovered these Facebook groups, and I was riding or something one day, and I thought, man, I could start one of those groups and just see how many people are actually interested in it, see how many people would actually enjoy it. And I was thinking, a couple hundred people.
Yeah, exactly. I was laughing about that because you watched the Snowblin episode, I think, right? And we had that. We were talking about Dale, and I said we need to make sure that we're clear on this because a lot of people don't even know who Dale Wilkinson is, right? And it's like the girls over there. You go over there and you're coaching and telling them, and you start telling stories about, and I'll say something like, Bill Horn, and they'll look at me like, I'm from Area 51, right? They have no idea, right? It's like, well, you might have heard of him, but they,
Right. It's crazy.
Times are changing.
Right.
So how important is it that we spend time, share history, move it forward? And you were talking about the History 101 group. So, and what you've kind of learned.
I mean, like I said, I started off as an experiment for me just to see how many people would be involved in it, how many people would actually be interested in it. I was surprised when there got to be like 1,000. That shocked me. Shortly after I had started the group, I was at the Reining fraternity that year and having a conversation with Joe Schmidt, and we were talking about it. It was like the group was in its infancy, and I said, how many of our fraternity finalists, not how many of the membership, how many of the fraternity finalists that are going to go in the arena on Saturday night know who Bill Horn was, or Bob Anthony, or Dale Wilkinson? And I would bet not half of them did. Maybe not even close to half. And when you're talking about the entire membership not knowing, that's one thing. But when you're talking about the, supposedly the top of our sport, I mean, that's kind of a different situation. So it became more apparent to me that something like that needed to happen. And I had already started it and kind of encouraged some different people. Bonnie Silva got involved in it and posted a lot of great old pictures and articles and things. And I believe that a whole lot more assistant trainers and trainers that would never say anything or never ask any questions to anybody face to face really, kind of started picking up on it and looking at it and reading all about the old days and all these things. So I think that's pretty important. You talk about why the NRHA was formed and, the money and the good ground and the judging. Yes, those were very important. But I specifically remembered Bob saying one of the big reasons they started the reining fraternity They wanted to put enough money in it to encourage people to leave their horses in training long enough to get the damn horse trained.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So make it pay good enough that someone would leave their horses in training long enough to finish the job.
Right.
Because at the time, people would just send their horse for a couple of months and you'd ride it and it'd do something and they'd take it home.
Right.
So that's not a commonly known part of the equation, but at the time, I think that was a measurable part of the equation of why why this whole thing got started the way it got started. So I think that's important to note when we start looking into the future and, where are we going to go from here? I think we have to remember that we need to encourage trainers to train horses that are broke at the end of the deal, that are nice horses for people to go ride. That's one of the reasons they wanted, the situation back in the day with the reining fraternity, put enough money in it so obviously they could pay some bills, but it would encourage the owners to leave the horse in training long enough to get finished.
Right.
The idea of a finished horse was the end result.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think sometimes that gets lost on people. You talk about prize money, and that's important, definitely. But the idea of having a finished trained reining horse at the end of that fraternity year was a key part of the whole thing in the beginning, and I think it's probably still should be today. Mm-hmm. Whether it wins any money or not, is it a nice horse? Can somebody go ride it around? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right.
Right. Jody talks about that a lot, and I hear you when I was active on the professional side, because having the finished product is ultimately what they were paying for. And,
right.
And yes,
and if it wasn't any money, that was just a side. That was a side benefit.
Right. If it could pay some of its bills along the way, that was a side. But
right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Right. No, that's how much many things have changed across that stuff. But it'll take us to economics. I'm going to have Travis pull up because I want to show you real quick. We've got a 2-year graph and it's been updated now, which is to date. It was, published December 7th. This is the money earnings in category 1 through 10 for the last 2 years in the sport of reining. And so if you two would think back, 25 years from now, and you two both hauled for world titles. So you know what this is like as well as anybody. But the point to this is, and you got in 2023, I'm using round numbers, 30% increase over 2022. This is the top 20. It's the top 10, and the orange bar to the far right on both those graphs is the 20th spot. And I just did that for relative purpose, so that the 20th top money earner for the year in the sport of reining is now, they're doing 6 figures, 113,000 last year and 144,000 this year. That's like
right.
That's huge, right?
Right. It is, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. It's
part of it.
Money is it's incredible.
Well, part of the bigger question is it sustainable? Is it going to be? Because if it is, then you see more financial economic incentives from careers and lifestyles and business, and there's more opportunities for people to enter the horse world and make careers and lives out of it, which is different than just a hobby or an activity, which is what all three of us have done. Right. We've just done it in different forms, right?
Right.
Bart, where do you
absolutely
where do you see us? Do you see it? Where do you see it going?
I think the money at the top end is awesome. I think it shines a beaming, bright, amazing, wonderful light on the top end of the sport. And I think that is strong in bringing people to the sport. I also think that we need to keep in mind that we need to recognize excellence at every level of the sport. In other words, there are the top 10 riders, the top 20 riders. I don't know how many horse trainers we have in the NRHA anymore, but that's 20 of them.
Right.
So that's cool. But what about the other, 300 or 400, or I don't know how many we have, but there's a lot more that aren't on that list that are successful, hopefully, and are doing things and creating excellence at their own levels. And I think if we can, somehow continue or expand on recognizing that, I think that is huge in the forward part of our sport, looking forward into the future. There are excellence there. Like I said, there's excellence at every level.
Yes.
There's excellent rookie horses. There's excellent limited non-pro horses. There's excellent limited open horses,
Yep.
So I love that. Everybody was kind of talking bad about the Run for $1 Million the first year. I loved it. I mean, we enjoyed it the very first year. Everybody was skeptical. I think it was huge. It was awesome. I think it has been huge for the sport. We're going to try to go to the American. I want to see that. I want to be there, feel it, see what's happening,
Yep.
on the grounds.
Yep.
I think that all that stuff is unbelievable, but we can't lose sight of the fact that there is excellence at different levels of the sport.
You bring up a very good point, and I agree with you, and I'm going to give you a piece. First, let me give you a simple number, because you're talking about 15 to 17% of the membership is listed as a professional. So the answer to your question, when we look at a top 20 list, are they the same top 20 last year and this year? The answer is no. I don't know exactly what the number is, but over half of it's a different shuffle. The rest of your question, according to the membership numbers and those that are listed as professionals, you got about 1,700 listed professionals as of 2022. I don't have 2023 numbers. So
that's amazing to me. That's a lot higher number than I thought it would be. That's good.
So, well, there you go. So that's part of that answer. And yes, but I think your terminology on excellence in all the different levels is 100% applicable, including officiating. And it's one of the struggling areas because excellent at the green level would be a different form of excellent than excellent at the fraternity finals. And we've got to teach ourselves how to implement that way better for the benefit of competition and all of those involved. Would you somewhat agree?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. 1,000%.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways,
we have to make this a viable thing, for all the people coming in, it has to be transparent. It has to be a broad base. You have to create situations where, like I said, you recognize people for what they can do at their level, through the judging, through the whole situation. Mm-hmm. Just the spotlight. I mean, it's awesome, the spotlight on the top 20 riders, like I said, but can we shine a little light on somebody else every now and then?
Well, the answer would be yes, but here comes.
As an industry or as a sport, right?
Well, I would pose this question, because the first part of that question is, how do other sports shine lights on the stepping stones in advancement in their industry? That's the bigger question that you're making reference to, and wholeheartedly. Right. Levels of achievement. How do you shine the light and provide rewards for each of the levels of achievement wherever whatever level you achieve?
Right.
We're asking the same. We're asking our own mother governing body to do it all. I question us now on, one, can they do it all? And then two, which appears not. And two would be, well, it would be starting to open the door and look at it differently, so that are there other ways by which to get that achieved? And you can use other sports. college NCAA is not the same as NFL or NBL or NHL or any of the rest of them. They're all chronological steps. So I say that in all due respect, because in advanced cowboy disciplines, I think that's part of what we're faced with holistically as an industry. And if we all collectively would start to put some resources and brain power into it, you could probably do a much better job than if you just haphazardly let it unfold however it's going to do. I just pose that as a big one.
Yeah, I agree. I think, NRHA, obviously, we push for the fraternity and we push for these higher events. And like I said, I think that's awesome. But I think there could be, they've kind of taken away the incentives for the affiliates and taken away different incentives for the lower levels and for people that kind of support the NRHA. I think we're all thankful for the NRHA that, it's given us a way to make a living for all these years. But we pay for that.
Yeah.
Like we pay them to be able to promote the sport that the NRHA is supposed to promote. We promote it, and we pay them for that for that opportunity to promote it for us and them. So I don't know. I mean, we can go down a lot of rabbit holes here, but I think, the bottom line is I think we need to make sure that we recognize, all the middle and lower levels of the sport. That makes it seem more valid, I think, to people coming in that maybe see those top 20 riders or the top 10 riders as something that is absolutely unattainable. And if I can't get to that point, why would I start down this road?
Right.
Yeah,
yeah. Jody, you want?
Well, and I'll throw something in here too, and it's like I feel like I was talk about somebody when you've got one leg on either side of the fence. I bitch pretty loudly about that. I agree wholeheartely, but we all understand that board of directors. Brian has been the president of this association. I've served on it 3 different times, and it's the board of directors that decides the direction the industry is going to go. I mean, they're the ones that say we're gonna pay $350,000 to the futurity winner, and so I'm going like, that's nuts, because I personally don't believe it's sustainable, and we'll get into that a little bit later, just my personal opinion. But I also shouldn't be bitching too loud because I don't have my hand up in the air saying, look, I want to go back on that board of directors again and try and help this thing, because Lord knows it was a chore, and every time I served on it, I swore I would never do it again, and then I would go back again. Right? I said, okay, I'm not going to do this again. So I mean, it is a
catch-22 to be on the board and to be in any of those positions. I completely understand.
Yeah, and it is. So that's where those decisions come from. Excuse me, Brian, go.
No, that's true. But Bart's been involved at the affiliate, state level, that kind of stuff. How many affiliates? Organizations are in Florida. How many you got? 3 or 4?
We have 2 in Florida, and then one, the Dixie Reining Horse Association thing in Georgia. So we have 3 within, a couple hundred miles of here.
Right, within reaching distance. Right. So it's similar, just at those levels.
Right.
Where I bring up the question. There's a couple pieces, because the NRHA, where the NRHA gets itself, I don't even know the best way of saying it. And I'm trying to say it with all due respect for all the reasons that you just alluded to. But it's a unique organization, and it's now finding itself in this unique position that with awareness, now by the numbers, our growth hasn't shifted much. Mm-hmm. Here's what shifted, because our current leadership has redefined growth by entries. And in our time, when the 3 of us were showing reining horses every year, all year, you're talking about the ratio of horse to entry at a given reining in our time was 1 to 1 to 2 tops. It's now 11. Mm-hmm. Which means the average horse the average reining horse goes to a horse show, it's being entered 10 to 11 times. That's true, and it's based off NRHA's own numbers of unique horses that are out showing and the amount of entries, because they're counting entries. And the amount of entries are going up, but membership is relatively status quo over the last 8 to 10 years. You got about 10,000 in the North American, you got about 5,000 international. That's what they're doing. And they've been trying to sort out that European, North American, and keeping everybody on a fair, measurable field. That's where our industry has been. And then in the last 3 to 4 years, up come the guarantee to the purses for all the logical reasons. And you now have outside influences pressing our industry, the North American performance horsemen at Teton Ridge and what they're doing with a Cowboy major event, Run for the Million, without a doubt. I was at the first one too. I remember crossing paths. I remember seeing you, Bart. And for the same reason, I wasn't going to miss it. Are you kidding? Shoot, I live out here, so it's like it's next door.
Right.
But now, and then you put all the breeding programs and you put 100X and what they're doing, and I'm not sure where they're going, but they're going to put on 4 major aged events, 3 in North America and 1 in Europe next year. So from the private sector and show
That's
production.
the plan.
Yeah.
That's their plan.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
I hear you. But if you read those scenarios, and the point to that question then becomes, because, and Jody and I have talked about this and we see it, in aged events, in building reining horses, there is a very distinct three groups of high-level horses, 3-year-olds, fraternity horses, 4-year-olds now, and what we call derby horses, 5 to 7s. Those are 3 distinct groups of great horses. You can look at the industry, and I would tell you there's 2 or 3, could be 4 groups of active people in the sport of reining, and that's what you're talking about, Bart. And now comes how do you provide an organization of services that you pay for that services the channels up and down? That's the bigger conversation, and we've been trying to pick away at that in different forms. So, but that's exactly what you're talking about. And so are there different ways by which to do that? And the answer would be yes, and this would lead us to another one, because we just had a conversation with John Snowblen talking about officiating. And if you haven't watched that show, you need to, Bart, especially being a historian that you are.
Well, I watched it, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
But an independent, and here's my point, because all it does is amplify a different way. An independent, and John brought this up, 2 things. 1, change the system. Not just make it better, change it. And 2 was work with some other disciplines and create an independent officiating business that's what they would do, was educate, find, recruit, educate, manage officiating for advanced horse sports. And so that's all very fascinating stuff, and is any one of our organizations.
Absolutely.
So have at it.
Yeah, I think obviously John was ahead of his time when he created, with the help of several others or a few others, I don't know, depends on the story, the judging system that we have today. I think that was an unbelievable amount of foresight on his part and their parts to head that way. I think it's been a great system, and I still think it's a great system.
It is.
But I agree with what he said. I don't know exactly how he said it on the podcast, but I think we need to start looking ahead another 20 or 30 years. Whatever that answer is, I don't know, but it seems like we get in a position where we're either working behind the 8 ball or we're just working to fix the problem that's right in front of us, instead of, shooting ahead 10 or 15 years and maybe fixing a lot of problems that might come about. And let's, maybe change big instead of just changing little bits at a time. I don't know. I don't know what that answer is, but I think it's worth talking about.
I do too, and I think that that's industry wide, not just the judging program. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's for everything. I think, first of all, for years I had a great stable full of clients, and they would do whatever I would ask them to do. If I wanted to go buy a good horse, they would buy it for me, and that's not the direction I went, because, as I told you before, that it was a non-pro barn, and everything that I bought was, I'd show them and had a great deal of success, but they're for a non-pro rider.
Right.
So,
Right.
and we used to go to shows, and, we'd have, all these, hell, they were over 50, right? Because they could, that's at the time in their life that they could afford it, and they could also take the time off. The money was made, and they did it because they wanted to have fun, and they loved what they were doing. And show size now has got so far out of whack from the standpoint of, I'd have guys and I'd say, okay, well, you're gonna draw and show at 11 o'clock tonight, and they go, no, we're not.
No,
we're not.
Yeah.
I mean, scratch. I'm not gonna show at 11 o'clock at night. No, I'm gonna go drink wine, and we're gonna have some fun. And over and over, I would hear, because I always had the Tulsa shows, which was our affiliate finals, so I couldn't go to the Select World Show, which part of my people wanted to go to, which was in Amarillo at the time, right? So, and all I would hear over and over again was the Select World Show was the most fun anyone ever had, because all the people, they were the same age. The show was done at 5 o'clock. They opened up the wine bottles, and they were having dinners, and they just had a blast. And now suddenly AQHA, I think probably it's financially, but they've moved, the Select to the World Show here in Oklahoma City, and so that's gone. So we're not perhaps the only one that's lost something like that. So I get the fact that, everything is now about how much money there is, and the shows are going 2 weeks, and, it's entry levels where you say, Brian, they're being shown 11 times, and 7 of those are schooling classes. You know what I mean? They're entered 7 times for paid warm-ups, and obviously money's not the object, because I've seen guys come and show to me in a Reining where it's a $350 entry fee and they're schooling, so it's a different world, but there's still plenty of room for those type shows where people can still enjoy themselves, and even especially at that starter level where they're not being
absolutely
killed.
And we're, as far as the officiating, absolutely, like I said, we have to let everyone know that they can recognize excellence at every level. But as far as, the scheduling and all the things with the horse shows, I mean, we've all done that, shown at 2 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the morning. And, like you said, I think a lot of people don't want to do that anymore. And it's another one of the things, we're basically in the service industry, and we're asking these people to buy these horses and, pay us a decent amount of money to go to a horse show and haul them down the road and all these. We better be able to make it fun for them on some level, somehow, regardless of how they do in the horse show. If they're not having a good time,
What are they doing?
What are they doing? Like us, if we'll go to a nice steakhouse and pay for a nice steak and have a drink and the whole deal. But if the waiter's a jackass, if they treat us bad, we're not going to go there, no matter how good the steak was. And you can deal with a tough steak every now and again if they're nice to you and they make you feel at home. That's what, the future of our sport, longevity of the horses, make everybody feel like they're a part of something. Gotta have a good time. We gotta enjoy it.
I agree with you both. Where I challenge us collectively as an industry, because, and I do get to say this, and I say it out of due respect, because we, the members, if you're a member in good standing, you actually own a piece of these organizations, all of them, every one of them.
Yes.
So, which means they work for us, period. The members, they're all membership-driven nonprofit orgs. And so the rest of that piece is looking at it differently, and horse show production is a big one. And Florida is a unique place because you guys have as many, if not maybe more now. And yes, you cross the paths between private and public sector, where Jody lives, but I call it the I-35 corridor. Between Fort Worth, you can actually go down to Waco. From Waco to Tulsa, there's a lot of facilities. So and
Right.
venues create the opportunity for show production. And where I'm going with this whole thing
Right.
is we've got to look at putting on horse shows differently to meet the needs of the exhibitors in the groups that they're needing it. And it's not all the same. And we've got to stop doing it
Right.
the way we used to. That's my point on that one.
Right.
Can you have,
I mean,
go ahead.
we've pushed for years, down here to have, like you guys have been to the Florida Classic in all of its, at one time or another in all of its existences over the years. And that has grown to be, if not the biggest, one of the biggest shows east of the Mississippi. And it has been, right on that line for decades now. I think, we pushed for years about having two larger shows in this region that cater to that kind of a horse show, where people come from all over the place and, a lot of money and all these things. And then also have, maybe once a month or 8 or 10 shows a year, weekend horse shows.
Yeah.
Like the weekend horse shows. Maybe a jackpot on Saturday and an NRHA day on Sunday. And, the thing's over with by 6 o'clock and everybody can go to dinner or they can have a party at the thing, like I said, let people have fun.
Yep.
And when they choose to go to a bigger show, we'll go to the bigger show, but you can't expect, I think it's a fallacy to expect everyone to, go to those shows and those are the only shows they're going to go to. As a professional, as a trainer, as an industry, as an affiliate, I think you have to, like you're saying, cater to both ends of the deal.
Yeah, I think Brian is, he's the one that's, forever, and it's, said, the high end. I mean, the people that come and watch a reining have already proven that if there's going to be a lot of money spent, they want to watch excellence. That's why the futurity finals have a big crowd. That's why they run for $1 million. Right. But the rest of the time, the stands are empty. Right. I mean, there's nobody there.
Right.
So it's, I think, and it's as much if you structured something for that. Brian has always said we need, excellence is that's what will bring in the crowd. That's what we need to see. But we don't need to have the affiliate shows at the Adequan when the futurity is going on, because the futurity is so big that sometimes those non-pro people aren't getting the attention they deserve if you're trying to get 3-year-olds ready and that kind of stuff. And it's, I mean, it makes perfect sense, but you also have to understand that you not only have to get around the board of directors, you have to get around the horse trainer that wants the mileage and wants the day charge of the 30 head that he can bring to the horse show, not just So it's a, like I said,
it is a Rubik's cube of issues. There's a lot of different ways you can turn things and twist things, and I don't know what the answer is specifically. I don't know that there are any specific answers, but I do know that at the local level, at the affiliate level, I think the hardest thing for the affiliates is to be able to afford to put on a show and make it affordable for the exhibitors. And in this day and age, everything's getting to be more expensive. We all know that. And then the level of sponsorship and who wants to give a bunch of sponsorship money to a horse show that has no one sitting in the stands, so there's a lot of different ways to look at things. I think the NRHA could, like I said, they used to have ways they would kind of give back to the affiliates, with different incentives and things that maybe would make it a little more affordable to the local shows. And, they decided to not do those things anymore, and they've, kind of increased the take and decreased the paybacks in different ways. So, I think there's a lot of different incentives that could come back into play that they used to have that would help some of those situations. But just like all of us, I mean, the little shows, the big shows, I think they all kind of struggle to pay for the things and to give that money away and to have those, shows. And, like the futurity, I mean, the trainers are relying on the the people to charge the mileage to get to the horse show, right? But I think the NRHA is relying on, a lot of entries in the equine arena to buy a lot of stalls that they didn't sell 10 years ago,
Oh,
For years,
well,
you had to be in the top 3 or the top 5 to qualify to go to the affiliate finals. And now all you have to do is show
right. You have to go to 2 or
and
3
get a
shows.
score.
Right. That
Yeah,
would
just get a
drive me.
score,
No, I hear you. But the answer on how do you take and I was a proponent of this when I was back on the board and an officer, because in order to give the affiliates, I wanted to create a different structure for affiliate champions for the year. And could the NRHA own and produce that in a different format? Yes, but it would be a standalone program and get it out of the fraternity. And I'll get a lot of hate mail for this one because I'm not a big fan of non-pros riding 3-year-olds either. So my 20 cents was, my 20 cents for the industry was make the 3-year-old fraternity an open fraternity, and that's what you make that event. Does it turn into a 2-week event? No, it doesn't. Because if you only got focused on that part, have a standalone affiliate championship, and how you get them there is another conversation. You can do that on your own. And the non-pros should have been moving to the 4-year-old and derby stuff. And that's where I would have put all that emphasis. That's just me and having come through it.
Right.
The point to that story is, can you look at it and do it differently and service each of those sectors accordingly? Non-pro aged event riders and what they're after is different than the pro riders. And I hear you guys on trying to take 2 or 3 rigs and all the day fees and the hauling fees, but guess what? The business guys will figure out business accordingly. So I see that as like the lowest issue, because if the industry is healthy and the activity is healthy and prices of horses are healthy and you're breeding more horses and training more horses, and I haven't heard anybody in the horse world in the last 15 years say that their barns were empty. I haven't heard anybody in 15 years tell me that hasn't been true. So the business will take care of itself. It truly will. If we looked at our market, which is our shows and how we put them on and what we do, and I say that holistically across, it's not just to the advanced Western disciplines. I say it across all the modern horse show stuff, because it's built on volume, which is how many stalls are going to rent. It's built on 2 simple principles. How many entries are going to pay across the show office, and how many stalls you're going to sell. That's what is, change it. Can you afford to go to a nice venue at a more affordable rate? Yes, you can. In our sport, it's called added money. And, they've been using the judges' fees for 20 years to balance the books for the amount of added money. Well, guess who paid the price? The judges. So, anyways.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things you can do that you could do. I think all of those things require, thinking really outside of the box and forward thinking on the part of the board and all the people who control the NRHA and all the affiliates and, all the trainers and all the things. And if nothing else, I think we have proven ourselves to be, horse trainers in general. We like to stay in the box. I think we like to do what's reasonably safe and comfortable. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to go, to get far outside that box and try to see things from other points of view. That's a pretty big ask, I think.
I hear you. And I hear you when you talk about people or horse people in general. I disagree with you when you talk about reiners, because we had nothing to lose. And I would tell you, as a reiner group, and I'm extremely proud of this, we moved forward faster than about anybody. That's true.
And you know that because here I'm gonna tie this back in. You know that because you know the history of where we came from.
Right. That's correct.
And some of us do, and some of us don't. So some of us don't realize why we did things the way we did, or why they did things the way they did in the beginning, and what got us here, and possibly what could get us to go forward. You know,
Yeah.
you know, like we talked about, Snowblin talked about the way they introduced that judges system is they basically turned the whole system upside down inside of a year or two.
And the rest of the
I mean,
industry.
can you imagine trying to do that today?
Well,
yeah.
I would tell you there's
It would-
I would
yeah.
I would tell you there's a couple that I think that are doing it in their own form. Run for the Millions, one. It is.
Yeah.
And it's not standing
And you know
still.
where that came
And
from?
The American Performance Horseman
It
is the
came
second
from
one.
outside the industry.
Correct.
They came from outside the industry. They have no affiliation with the NRHA whatsoever.
Right.
When they did all that,
Right.
they had to ask permission from the NRHA to be allowed to do what they were doing.
Correct. But that's my point. It can be done. And the
Right.
American Performance
But
Horseman is another one.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, it requires forward thinking, outside the box,
Yep.
and some vision for the future.
Yep. Looking
Let's
forward.
not
If it has
forget
to
a great-
come from
a great deal of-
outside, it has to come. Yeah.
Yeah, let's not forget a great deal of money.
Right. And a great deal of money.
And a great deal of money. Let's not forget that.
The smallest part of the whole thing, Jody. Come on.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, but that's for great. That's great conversation, and it's sometimes it's the people still though, like as we talk about it being self-serving, and I'll just be brief so we can move on. But it's like I'd get a. Because if I chaired the judges committee, someone would call me and they'd say, okay, well, we're an affiliate right here, and we want to have our futurity when we always have it, but the state next to us, they're wanting to have a futurity, and now that they want the same dates that we have because there's, so many miles between us, and it's like, you're two small affiliates and you're in a pissing match, and why can't you guys work together and have one futurity together instead of trying to have two separate ones? But,
Right.
it's like age-old problems, and I don't know if that will ever go away.
I've been directly involved with those a few different times with the the so-called pissing matches between affiliates, and I mean we've had our own down here, and I have been involved, like I said, directly on trying to quell them, and you get everything worked out, and everybody agrees on something, and then 6 months later somebody hears that somebody said something or somebody did something, and the whole thing goes right back out the window. I have lobbied the NRHA for years and was on the affiliate committee for about 15 minutes and tried to convince them of my thoughts, and realized I wasn't getting anywhere of not approving all these shows right on top of each other. And I know Brian has a different opinion on that, but I don't know what the answer to that is, but again, there's so many different ways to go. The good news is that we have these problems with, too many horse shows and too much going on, and how do we manage it all? That's the best news of the day, I guess.
Right.
That we have to even have these conversations.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yes. Having the conversations is a big piece. The importance of understanding and knowing our history, I happen to believe that it is valuable because that makes looking forward actually easier. That's
Right.
my own view on that. So, and I think
And,
you
and
hit
when it comes time, like we talked about, go ahead.
No, I think the looking forward is something that we all as people and horse people have to be more aggressive about, because it's easy to get stuck in the rut, and stopping for a minute
Right.
and looking forward and thinking forward as opposed to where we are right now is the one that takes a little bit of work. And then it's the rest of the resources. So what were you going to say?
Right. Oh, I don't even know.
Yeah.
We can, like I said, we can go so far down the rabbit hole we can't find our way back out. But like I said, I think it's good that we can have these discussions, and The one thing that I liked that John said is, the bad thing about getting a committee or the board and some of those situations in a room is when you get the same bunch of people in a room repeatedly, no matter what their ideas were to begin with, they all begin to think the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit dangerous. So I think, we need to try to keep in mind other people's point of view and other people's ideas and, try to exercise some of those.
Yeah. Well, it's
right.
Our industry. And part of that is this one's come up several times. And I've actually been questioning myself because have I been wrong here? Calling the reining industry an industry. Is it really an industry? As opposed.
That's a good question.
And we're wanting, I just watched the NCEA finals the other night, and I thought they did a phenomenal job, but here's the point. They were talking about how family it all was, and it made me think of which the NCEA isn't that much different than the NRHA and the NRCHA, and so all of us as nonprofit membership horse orgs are very similar, but it truly made me think about, are we really a professional, sophisticated industry, or are we just a very large, extended, slowly growing family?
Horse club.
Yeah.
Big horse club.
Yeah. And we got self-interest, and we're circulating our own money. That's what we're doing. Right?
I think what do you think, Jody?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about that. We've had this discussion before, and like I said, we've had great conversation. I don't want to get too far off the beaten track, but we talk about sustainability, and we talk about, you've heard me say that. I love the prize monies. I think that's great. I'm with you. I think it's great for the industry, but we are a giant jackpot, right? We run it our own money, our full enrollment programs, if you go to the Kentucky Derby's website, you'll see, obviously the thoroughbred racing's, popular throughout the world, but you'll see sponsors from, doesn't matter if it's Coca-Cola, Rolex, Mercedes, outside of the horse industry itself. And here you come, to NRHA, and we just keep beating the same old people up over and over and over again to donate money, because that's we expect you to do it because you like the sport. And we need $100,000, and if you're making bridles or splint boots, but it's in the box, and that's just where it stays. And I feel like at some point in time we had that conversation. What happens if one of those guys that gave us $100,000 every year dies, or their kids don't want to continue to do that? Then where are we? So, and Brian and I have had extensive discussion about that. So, is it sustainable? I can't see it. I can't see it continuing at the level that it is without some outside sponsorship money coming in from somewhere. So, just an opinion, personal.
Completely. That's where you say, are we an industry or are we a really big fancy horse club? That depends on your point of view, and I think it's pretty easy to say that we've we're the best at this and we're the best at that and we're the best at all these things, and we have grown and we have made leaps and bounds in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, the last 40 years, all of it, but we're not there yet, I don't think, and there's still a lot of distance to travel. And we can talk about how wonderful it is that the fraternity winner got paid $350,000 this year. I think that's awesome. It's wonderful. It's huge. But where let's talk about some stability, and let's talk about how do we make this happen every year, and how do we get it to 500,000, and how do we make sure the level one open guy gets 40,000 and can pay for his trip, at least if he wins it. Well, I don't know what the answers are, but I think we really, really, really need to keep looking forward.
I hear you. Yes, looking forward. And I would tell you a different way of looking at that. If you took the amount of money that is now available via competition, purse money, in the last 2 years, and looked at, but here's my point, because you got 20th this year, did 144,000 a year. Is that healthy? Yes, it is. Now the sustainability is keeping that pool of purse eligibility out there, but it's how you start to divvy it up and the leveling stuff, and that's a big one that Jody and I have been talking about. And I would tell you this, this conversation at the affiliate level and the aged event level is a very interesting one, because are we really incentivizing people to enter our industry, and then are they working their way up? Or are we just creating a bigger recirculating function? Because that would go into sustainability, but it's a level 1 and 2 in the open side of the aged events. Because if you began to pay, it's not getting the fraternity champion to pay, this is my opinion, getting the fraternity champion to pay $500,000 or $1 million. I would say that's not the goal, because those open riders at that level, in a year's time, I don't know how many events they're going to, but it's somewhere between 6 and 10. They're doing $500,000 to $750,000. So the money's available. The real work would be, how do you begin to pay and give the crown and attention and some of that stuff, but the money along with it, it's in the level 1 and 2. Those new ones coming in and coming up, which is the same thing as how do you give affiliate recognition for achievements that they've got. And so that's where I would tell you the work is.
And I'll play the devil's advocate here, and sometimes they'll say, well, we can't give the level 1 and 2 too much money, because then they just shoot right up in there in the level 4, and that's really really not good for them.
So yeah, it is.
If they win too much money, man, it just kicks them up, and they need to stay. Then they're out of.
And how many?
That's the argument. That's one of the arguments.
Okay, and how many college athletes are trying to be the number 1 draft pick in 4Y? That's the answer.
Right. I get it.
Because if you're number 1, the contract's way higher. Period. So the value. So it's not. That's not a bad thing. And we're seeing it. We're living it now.
I get it. I think, and I think the other. We'll go down. Maybe take a left in this rabbit hole. And what about the guys that are counting on those level 1 guys that are trying to count on their prize money to pay their bill, to pay their rent and to pay their mortgage and to pay their things. Are they getting anywhere, or should they be, what should they be doing? Are they headed in the right direction, or should they do something different with their business? That's not really our place to say, I guess. So,
Right.
Well,
yeah, like I said, there's all kinds of, you've heard me talk about this many times. We're talking about leveling, or the same thing that we're talking about, that level 1, level 2, level 3 rider, and everybody in the whole business, and rightfully so, because top 20 guys are there because they're fine horsemen and they're really good at what they do. But the reason that they're where they are is because of the livestock that they're riding. And so the leveling needs to come from the horse standpoint, not from the rider standpoint, because there's 100 guys that can win the futurity if they've got the right horse. But they may be a level 2 rider for 10 years because they'll never have one of those, right? So anyway, that's just my opinion on the leveling. Horse numbers, when you give top 20 guys 3 head to ride, they're going to kick your ass when you've only got 1, right? That maybe can compete with them. So it's a different thoughts, but some different issues.
I think, like I said, I think it's good that we have to have these conversations to try to figure it out. Right?
Yes.
I think that's a
success.
good thing, that we're not sitting around going, man, this is terrible. What are we going to do?
Right.
So
no, I completely agree.
We've talked about we've talked about those industry issues, right? So, I mean, are we getting better at it, or are we just standing still? I mean, that's a question. I mean, Brian's, we talked about the drug rules. We talked about the international versus domestic, amateur, non-pro, rookie, green reiner. Those are all subjects that we could have a different show on each one of those. But I mean, as our board of directors, are we doing enough? Brian, I would ask you this question too. And not just you, Bart, but are we doing enough to try to remedy the situation, or are we just letting it go by? And I mean, I know that there's probably some more ways around this than just that board of directors. I mean, from the show management standpoint, we look at the 100X, we look at, the American, we know that those are tremendously successful in relatively short periods of time. So is that the direction that we need to keep going? I mean, to rely on the outside of NRHA, or do we need to stay within NRHA to help us in the directions that we need to go? What I'm saying is that, I remember a long time ago when the Derby was at St. Paul, which was my affiliate when I was living in Minnesota, and that affiliate, that North Central affiliate, and it was Sally Brown. She was like, you know what, we're going to have a limited non-pro class. Oh, there's a big stink about it, right? And because there hadn't been one before, right? And then or a limited open class, and then we're going to add $1,000. Said, oh, you can't do that. I mean, everybody had a fit, right? I mean, it was like, but outside the box thinking, and all of a sudden it's like, whoop, here we go. Now everybody does it. So
and now it's normal, yeah.
Right. So do we have to rely on people outside of NRHA to steer us in the direction that we want to go? In other words, they didn't ask for approval; they just did it anyway. You know what I mean?
The answer to that's pretty obvious, to me anyway. I think yes. You have to. But the best things that have come along, in at least in the last few years, have come from outside the NRHA. In my opinion.
So, Brian, what's your thoughts on that from the standpoint of do you have to have approval to do what you want if it's a good idea?
The answer is no. You do not have to have approval. It's whether or not you want it. What does approval by any sanctioning body provide you? That's the answer. And so that's from a show production standpoint as far as what is it that you're after. In the horse show world, in the event world, and this is where the advanced cowboy disciplines are trying, they're in this phase. And the point is it's from a horse show and moving into a sporting event, and we're circulating and trying to figure that out. Run for the Million is doing it. The American Performance Horseman is doing it. 100X has got its own, but it's a great merge of those two because it's a 2-week massive event that is catering to it's got all the other classes as well as this high focus on high purses and multiple age events. It's got fraternities, derbies, and 4-year-olds. So our industry is in that place circulating. I would tell you the answer is no. Does it have to have a regulatory body? No, it does not. Why does it? Generally, it's for two simple reasons. One is for rules and regulations, all of them, which include officiating functions. And two, it's for insurance and liability functions. Which is a standardized function in how you're going to play the game. That is the big thing. But can you go, Bart's down there in the heart of hunter jumper world for the winter. There's a ton of non-sanctioned hunter jumper stuff going on between, North Florida and South Florida. And then there's USEF and FEI stuff that's all going to happen too, which are sanctioned and it's about the standard. It's the standard by which a competition is going to happen. So that's the answer. The rest of that question comes into being, what is the best role for the NRHA to continue to play? And I would say the lessons it learned through the FEI are a big one. And I don't know who's listening to those lessons, but there's a lot of them there to be learned when you talk about the domestic versus international. And I would then say that those lessons are very applicable when you talk about affiliate versus aged event. And when you talk about why in the world would our discipline now want to go down the amateur path when we've got 9,200 active non-pros? That is a fascinating quest, but we're doing it, right? Which would put us, and Well, the rest of that is that the cutters have had amateurs and non-pros for our lifetime, for 40 years. So they actually, it's just another level of activity. That's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
So did
I think. Go ahead, Jody.
No, I mean I agree, and I mean I'm going back to the Brian said this many times. We all have valid points, and one of those things: do you need approval? Do you not need approval to have? We say, well, no, we don't, because I mean, good things happen when you don't get approval, and then people jump on board after they found out. Well, hell, it was a good idea. We should have done that. And when I chaired the judges committee, I would say we're doing it. I'd get argument, and I'd say, hey, if it doesn't work, we'll put it back. But we're going to do it. We're going to try this. The end gate camera was a big one. I got all kinds of grief about that. Now it's like, oh God, we got to have that because it helps us with our penalty application. But you have to basically just beat people over the head with it sometimes to get the idea. And it's like that one, I didn't even ask for approval. I mean, Jeremy said, well, did you get approval? I said, oh, hell yeah, put it down there for me. Right? I mean, I didn't, just went ahead and did it. But so to Brian has said this many times, can one organization do everything that we've talked about tonight? I mean, is there enough, and especially with volunteer people running the organization? In other words, I mean, that board of directors, you're not getting paid for that. I mean, it's like, hell, it costs money to be on the board of directors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but so can one, and Brian, I'll put this question to you because you're the one that comes up with this question all the time, and it's a valid point. Can one organization do it all, or maybe I should say, can one organization do it all structured the way that it's currently structured?
The simple answer is no. In today's time, can one organization be all of it for all of it in our industry or discipline and all of those forces? And I would tell you no. And should we look at it very differently? Yes. And collectively, because again, and I've been a large proponent of this, I see our industry in very distinct groups, and there's two big ones: one, the affiliate level, and two, the age event level. Those are two separate parts of the industry. In our time, when all three of us were way more active, it was all the same. It's just which event we went to. That's the only, right? So the simple answer is, in today's time, can one organization be it all and do it all? And that answer is no. And I would tell you the FEI NRHA 20-year trial tells part of that tale. No, it can't. And there's plenty of other examples that you can look at, but that's the answer. So now comes, what could the NRHA branch out and create a structured format that subsidiaries would be doing some of those parts, including an independent officiating system? Could the NRHA have a recruitment, educational, and management system for officiating Western disciplines? Yes, it could, and do it for cutters, cow horses, reiners, ranch riders, trail, whatever, yes, it could do that. Would that be part of the structure and how we're doing things now with the NRHA? And the answer would be no, it'd be different. Could it be a subsidiary or could it be independent? Sure. I don't think that one's worse or better than the other.
I mean, from my limited knowledge of, NRHA board stuff and, that level of executive board management, I think that the NRHA could successfully manage the judging, the membership, and the record keeping easy, clear. I think those three things are pretty cut and dry, and then and leave all of the other promotions and horse shows and the futurity and the other things to some other entity. I don't know if that's where you guys are going with some of this, but I think there's some things that they can do and do well without. I mean, we have the what am I trying to say? They paid a lot of money for the record keeping part of the website, the Raider Suite deal.
Yeah.
I think Yeah, the database. That's what I was looking for. I think that stuff is all there. Like you're saying, I don't know where you talk about controlling, maybe too much control, maybe maybe let people make their own minds up about other things. I think someone needs to control or manage the judging system in whatever it's going to be, whether it's in its current state or, like I heard you guys talking about a few weeks ago, the idea of, like the NFL referees having, regional sets of
Yep.
officiating teams
Yep.
that would judge shows. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would go, "Oh my God, that's a horrible idea," but I definitely think that's an interesting path to go down to at least talk about.
Well,
I think that's
there's two parts to that part. One is there's a business wall between officiating and competition, and you got to make that wall very clear in a competitive sport. That's true, and it's already been proven. So that's not new news. And ours is very clouded. So the minute you get a wall in there and separate those, the more integrity is going to come to the sport. That's fundamentally true. And then comes the rest of it, because how he who wins, so goes everybody else. That's been the way it's been since the beginning of time. And is that going to change? No. So that's the consequence of having high integrity to competition. So then comes the rest of rules and regulations. And when you talk about event production, and here comes, and I'm not picking a side, I'm not trying to be judgmental, I'm just identifying a weakness. In all of our horse organizations, they're all guilty of this, because they are record-keeping regulatory bodies that belong to the membership. That's what they set out to do. I don't care if they're breed registries or competition registries. They all got involved with show production. And now you have a clouded space, because you're also competing with yourself, because when you talk about date sanctioning and putting on horse shows, and licenses to do such and rules to run it by and all that stuff. And so my point to that would be, and I get it, because how did we get where we got? Because the NRHA owned the fraternity. It was the only thing it did. It did the fraternity, but that was its first purpose. After running the fraternity was the importance of keeping records. That came second in the sequence. Does that make sense? Well, it's flipped, because now your data and your records is way more important than who owns and runs a fraternity.
Yeah, I think the very most important thing that the NRHA needs to do in the future is the whole database and the record keeping, because that is, that's what people can look back on and look up and see things about some of these horses, long after the stories of this horse could turn big or this horse could stop big, or man, whoever won the fraternity. You can go back and look at that information and, decide what you want to breed to, or decide what you want to own, or, any of those things. So I think that's probably one of the most, that should be a keystone in the whole deal for NRHA. Way more than show management, for sure.
Right. So that's all. I just bring up the obvious, because that's what's, and they're all blessings, because we're pursuing success. And so how do you manage and deal with success? You've got to somewhat be able to look in the mirror and find your own weaknesses, and then start to adapt. So anyways.
Right. And again, if you go back to the history of all of this, it wasn't that long ago. All this stuff was done on a kitchen table somewhere in Ohio.
Yeah.
We've come a long ways.
Yes, we have.
Maybe some of it has been forward thinking, and some of it has been, reactive thinking to the problem that was directly in front of us. But we've come a long ways. I think there's, like I said, there's still a long ways to go.
Yes.
There is. And, like I said, it's even from the judging standpoint, you've heard me say it's in the middle. And I think that's probably a safe thing to say about the future of our industry, if that's what we're going to call it, or the reining. It's like, we need forward thinking, and we need to stay with some of the things that have worked for us. So it's like, but you can't stay stuck in one spot. That's for sure.
If we concentrate on the whole longevity of the horses, let's make some nice horses and make sure that people can, make a living as best they can doing that and promoting that. And just keep an eye on, like I said before, those different levels of excellence through the whole, all the classes, and, everybody have a good time. That's all, this is fun. We're supposed to do this for fun. We aren't, but they are.
Yeah, exactly. It's a business. Well, I've had a great time. It's like, Brian, have you got something that you want to talk about here?
No,
that we haven't covered.
Well, we could. I think the three of us could probably write a book or a couple of them.
Right.
So, and I'll
Nobody
be questioning.
read it, but we can write the shit out of it.
Right.
Well, today's time you can do it in audio, and they don't have to read it. You can just listen to it.
Exactly.
So, of course, we could keep going, and we always kind of can. But no, I think we've hit it well. Bart, thank you for your time. It's great to reconnect.
Thank you, guys.
It's been an absolute pleasure. We wish you, your family, a very Merry Christmas, and thank you so much for your time and your thoughts and insight.
Yes, same to you guys. I mean, I think this is a great thing you guys started doing here, and I mean, it's awesome. I think that the times that we live in, where you can have things like this, and people can agree and disagree, and other people can see and disagree and agree. It's all good stuff. Entertainment and education. It's awesome.
I think, I couldn't agree more. And you've been great, and it went exactly like I thought it was going to be. And like I said, we could make a week's worth out of this if we wanted to. But and we were talking about that. People are going to agree, they're going to disagree. We want you to drop us a note with your questions, with your input if you've got some. If you'd like us to talk about it, cowboyoffice.com. Don't forget to put your email in. And again, it's cowboyoffice.com. We've had so much fun. We've had so much great input from you, from the viewers out there. Bart, we appreciate what you've done so much, showing up with us, and I look forward to seeing you at the next horse show, my friend. But,
yes, sir. Good to see you.
Well, until the next time, stay in the middle.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Today's episode is brought to you by 4D Productions in cooperation with the Consultment Agency, a full-service agency that helps bring forward-thinking equine brands into the 21st century using digital skills and services such as website development, graphic design, social media, and media production such as the podcast you're consuming here today. Thank you so much for riding along with us today. Sign up at cowboyoffice.com to be the first to know about topics affecting the industry we love so much. You can reach out to us with topics you care about by finding us on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and all podcast platforms. And remember, share this episode with someone that may enjoy it, because the more we can share our horses with others, the better our world will be.